Welcome, I'm Catherine Hadro, and this is EWTN Pro-Life Weekly.
And I call this meeting to order.
Bishops assemble. U.S. Catholic bishops this week voted overwhelmingly in favor of a document on the Eucharist. Hear how this relates to the debate on pro-abortion politicians and Holy Communion. Transition in leadership. This week marks the end of Archbishop Naumann as USCCB Pro-Life Chair and the start of Baltimore Archbishop William Lori's term. We speak with both archbishops as Naumann reflects on his past 3 years and Lori looks ahead to what his pro-life leadership role will look like under a Biden administration. Worth noting, a podcast for kids shares pro-abortion views and rhetoric. What you need to know about what this children's show is saying about the Texas heartbeat law. I Speak Out.
This document started out with trying to actually target legislators who were Catholic and who were presenting themselves for Holy Communion.
Personally, my understanding is that the intention of the document was not that. The intention of the document since the beginning was to educate Catholics about the real presence of Jesus in the Eucharist.
It was never the intention to target any individuals or group of individuals.
The U.S. bishops this week voted overwhelmingly in support of a document on Eucharistic coherence, which did not single out neither politicians nor abortion, despite media hype and speculation. The vote came during the U.S. bishops' Fall General Assembly in Baltimore this week, their first in-person meeting since the start of the coronavirus pandemic. The vote on the document on the Eucharist was 222 in favor, 8 against, with 3 bishops abstaining. The document is called The Mystery of the Eucharist and the Life of the Church, and it's focused on the centrality of the Eucharist in the Catholic faith. While no politician was named during the debate and discussion on the document, there was an undertone about the responsibility of U.S. bishops when it comes to pro-abortion politicians and Holy Communion.
The scandal factor is quite significant, and to really address that more than just mentioning it, I believe is very beneficial to the faithful.
We've said this before, but one of the reasons we need to say it again is because I'm not sure that we've taken it seriously as bishops, our responsibility for the care of the souls of these politicians.
You just heard Archbishop Joseph Naumann of Kansas City. This week also marks the official end of Archbishop Naumann's role as chair of the U.S. Bishops Pro-Life Office. He has served in that leadership role for 3 years, but this assembly marks the start of the term for incoming pro-life chair, Baltimore Archbishop William Lori. Joining us now from Baltimore is the outgoing chair for the USCCB's Committee on Pro-Life Activities, Archbishop Joseph Naumann of Kansas City. Welcome back to the show, Your Excellency, for what is our last interview with you in this pro-life role. I first want to ask you, when it comes to this topic of Eucharistic coherence, you spoke about the need for conversation and dialogue to ultimately lead to conversion for some politicians. Can you speak more to that and what you're trying to highlight there?
Yes, I think the document, it's a much broader document than just that. It's laying the foundation for this whole Eucharistic revival initiative. But in the document, we repeat some of the things that we've said in the past about the importance that we as bishops, as shepherds, have to try and engage those that are in public life, Catholics living in public life, and especially when they're living in ways that are not coherent, not consistent with some of our basic and most fundamental Catholic teachings. So as pastors, we have to be willing to enter into those difficult dialogues sometimes with our politicians for their good and also to protect our people from being misled.
Absolutely. Your Excellency, you chaired this pro-life committee during a Donald Trump presidency and during the election inauguration and first year of President Joe Biden's term. Looking back at your 3 years as pro-life chair, What do you see as your greatest achievement, and where were the areas of greatest challenges?
Well, we talked today to the bishop about walking with moms in need, a special initiative that's really implemented at the parish and diocesan level, but it's a national initiative to try to expand the resources within our communities for those with difficult pregnancies, and that the church becomes a place where people know that they can come, and we don't always have to provide all the services ourselves, but we can connect them and we can accompany them, as the Holy Father likes to say. And so to me, that's very exciting. And unfortunately, the pandemic interfered with some of that implementation. But as I was telling the bishops today, it's always timely. And so many of the dioceses, I think, who haven't already begun will begin that now.
2 weeks from now is a major abortion case at the Supreme Court. This is a potentially pivotal time for the pro-life movement because Roe v. Wade could be overturned. Your Excellency, can you speak from a spiritual lens? Where do you see God at work in the pro-life movement right now? And what do you see as our responsibility as Catholics who are living during these historic times?
Yeah, well, I think the Holy Spirit has definitely been at work. I think none of us could have foreseen the Trump presidency and some of the justices that came to the Supreme Court because of that presidency. And as I say now, it's a time of promise, but also a time of peril for the pro-life movement. For many of us that have been in this movement for a long time, our hope has often been that the court that created the problem would help to solve the problem. And so there's much hope with the Dobbs case that it'll allow states, again, to protect it in a greater way, unborn children, and protect mothers from the tragedy of every abortion. So I think it's also a time of peril because the culture of death is even more motivated as they feel threatened by the possibility of this decision. So I think it's a time for all of us in the pro-life movement to increase our efforts at this moment.
Absolutely. We need to be fasting and praying ahead of that case. You have been a vocal advocate for life for years prior to being pro-life chair. As a young priest, I understand that you oversaw the pro-life office at the Archdiocese of St. Louis, and you began the Project Rachel ministry in that archdiocese. The list goes on. How will you continue to advance a culture of life as an archbishop now that you're transitioning out of your role as pro-life chair?
Well, I think the life of the church is lived at the local level, so I look forward to being even able to be more focused on my local church. It's been a great privilege to serve the bishops in this role as chair of the committee, and I've enjoyed it. But I think the real work that really changes the world happens in our parishes and in our diocese. So I look forward to going back to be more focused on that, and especially how can we produce more resources for moms. But also in Kansas, we have a very important moment coming up. In August, we'll be voting on a state constitutional amendment because our state Supreme Court issued a decision 2 years ago that claimed to find a right to abortion in the Kansas Constitution. So we have to write that. So this is going to be a very important time in Kansas, and look forward to being able to throw myself fully into that effort.
Absolutely. Yeah, that Kansas amendment is critical. I think it's the first pro-life vote following the Dobbs decision next year, so we'll continue to monitor that. Your Excellency, as Archbishop William Lori of Baltimore now takes on the role of the U.S. Bishop's pro-life chair, do you have any guidance or wisdom you'd want to offer him for these next 3 years?
Well, first of all, the IQ of the chairman has gone up significantly with Archbishop Lori succeeding me, and he has great wisdom and great passion. So I look forward to supporting him. But I think all of us in that position, we have to work our pastoral plan, which is based on prayer, on education and formation, on on the pastoral and providing alternatives and ministering to those that have had abortions and regret it. And then finally, advocacy to try and impact public policy. So I think he'll continue on all four of those pillars of the pro-life work.
Absolutely. And we have about a minute left, Your Excellency, but I just wanted to ask, what do you see as the top pro-life priority today, right now?
I think the top pro-life priority is to pray and to fast for the Dobbs decision, for the court to have the courage to do what we hope it will do, and then to be prepared in our states. If our states do protect life more, then we have to be willing and able to help even more women that may come to our pregnancy clinics. And if it doesn't, then the only way we can protect children and protect women, which we value both of them, is through love and through the compassion of the church and our allies.
Absolutely. Great reminder. And just know of our gratitude for your work these past 3 years and this important pro-life role, and know of our prayers for you moving forward. Archbishop Joseph Naumann, outgoing chair for the U.S. Bishops Committee on Pro-Life Activities. God bless you.
Thanks, Catherine. Thanks for the great work you do. God bless.
God bless. With the vote on the Eucharistic coherence document this week, the U.S. bishops avoided a direct rebuff of President Joe Biden and other pro-abortion Catholic politicians. But the drafting of the document spurred national conversation about how the Biden administration's actions on abortion contradict the church's teachings on life. To discuss this further is Prudence Robertson, Communications Associate for the Susan B. Anthony List and a fellow Catholic here. Prudence, welcome back to the show. Let's dive right in. The bishops have stated before that ending abortion is a preeminent priority. Why must we as Catholics prioritize protecting the unborn?
Well, we've talked on this show before, Catherine, about the importance of respecting and recognizing the humanity of these unborn children growing in the womb. It is a foundational tenet of our Catholic faith. It's also a founding principle of our nation, and it's just common sense. It's the position of love and compassion, and we're so thankful to Archbishop Naumann and pro-life bishops like him who have done such a good job about being courageous and standing up for the right to life. And he especially has been a real leader on this, especially when he spoke about Joe Biden when he was elected, saying that he really should not be calling himself a devout Catholic when he supports abortion on demand.
There has been a lot of buzz surrounding this Bishop's General Assembly this week about President Biden and his actions on abortion. Bring us up to speed. What actions on abortion has the Biden administration taken this year so far? Well,
there's really no way to mince it. Joe Biden has proven himself to be radical when it comes to expanding abortion access. When he was sworn in, almost instantaneously, he began to funnel more taxpayer dollars to fund abortion, both at home and overseas. He's also appointed abortion activists to serve in his cabinet, such as Javier Becerra, and has gone so far to even step back on his belief that life begins at conception. He stated that at a press conference, I believe. Yeah. And his Department of Justice is currently trying to find a way to sue the state of Texas for advancing a law that protects babies with beating hearts. And, you know, some would think and imagine that this might be weighing on his conscience because he used to claim to be pro-life, but now it seems that he is deaf to the deeply held moral beliefs of Americans and Catholics that he claims to represent.
We need to pray for him. The ultimate goal is conversion of souls there. Prudence, we know, according to the Pew Research Center, that Catholics make up about 30% of the U.S. Congress right now. But we know not all of those Catholic members are pro-life. So what is the Susan B. Anthony List's response to Catholic members of Congress who have a pro-abortion stance?
Well, some of these so-called Catholics, perhaps Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, Carolyn Maloney, they are really just Catholic in name only. And as lay people striving to live out our faith authentically, it is most discouraging when we see these people who are supposed to be the leaders of the free world claiming to be Catholic and yet in the same breath supporting the expansion of abortion on demand, championing the killing of millions of little children intended for this world. It leads to divisiveness and brokenness within the church as a whole. And if I were given the opportunity to speak to those members of Congress, I would remind them that the Catechism lays out very clearly that supporting life, protecting life, and opposing abortion is the preeminent moral issue, as you said.
Absolutely. We have 30 seconds left, Prudence, but real quick, give us a preview. What should viewers prepare for ahead of the Dobbs case at the Supreme Court 2 weeks from now?
Yes, well, some exciting news. SB A-List just launched 3 new ads that rely on scientific advances to showcase and prove the humanity of unborn children. They feature a young girl named Annie who was adopted, who shares her story, as well as doctors who very expertly explain that the science that our current abortion jurisprudence depends on is outdated by about 5 decades.
Wow.
So it's important that the laws be updated.
And we need to pray for that case as well. Prudence Robertson, thank you as always.
Thank you.
We need your prayers more than ever, especially as we prepare for the upcoming Supreme Court abortion case, Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization. This case on December 1st, just 2 weeks away, will pose a direct challenge to Roe versus Wade and potentially will have major consequences for the pro-life cause. That brings us to this week's call to action. Go to ProLifeWeekly.com to find out how you can join in praying for the unborn and the U.S. Supreme Court ahead of the Dobbs versus Whole Women's Health abortion case. When you go to ProLifeWeekly.com, you will get all the details for a weekly nationwide prayer call happening every Monday at 8:30 p.m. Eastern, led by Susan B. Anthony List President Marjorie Dannenfelser. Join this important weekly prayer call every Monday evening at 8:30 p.m. Eastern by calling 833-380-0736. You can go to ProLifeWeekly.com for that phone number again and for all the prayer call details. Coming up, a kids podcast breaks down Texas's heartbeat law in a very pro-abortion way. I speak out. Plus, we speak to the new chair of the U.S. Catholic Bishops Pro-Life Committee, what he is saying about his new role and the importance of religious liberty for the pro-life cause. Welcome back to EWTN Pro-Life Weekly. I'm Catherine Hadro. A podcast for kids turns pro-abortion when speaking about Texas's heartbeat law. That is this week's Speak Out segment. Worth noting, a kids podcast about current events dedicated a recent episode to Texas's heartbeat law. They said their goal was to break it down for children to understand. But this News for Children podcast had a pro-abortion spin. Take a listen to this clip.
On September 1st, 2021, a controversial decision was passed in Texas that infringes on a pregnant person's right to abort their pregnancy. An abortion is a medical procedure to end a pregnancy.
The podcast episode is titled SB 8 and Losing the Right to Choose. The host failed to refer to expecting mothers as mothers or women. Instead, he referred to them as a pregnant person. The only time he said the word women was when he quoted President Biden's disapproval of the law. It's clear that this podcast, worth noting, is not an impartial, nonpartisan news podcast about current events for kids. Instead, it's perpetuating abortion propaganda. We've come to, unfortunately, expect that from many news media organizations. But there is something deeply troubling that this is abortion messaging tailored and marketed towards children. It is important to share with kids about current events in the world in an age-appropriate manner. But those conversations really should be led by parents. And when it comes to the topic of abortion, it's most important that we speak the truth about what it is. Again, in an age-appropriate manner. I think of my friends over at the group Contend Projects who have their book about the beginning of life called When You Became You. Children at a young age can already grasp how life begins in the womb. Parents, be aware of how abortion messaging may be reaching even your young children already, and be sure to take the lead on teaching them about the beauty of unborn life. As I reported earlier in the show, this week, Baltimore Archbishop William Lori officially becomes the chair of the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops Committee on Pro-Life Activities. His term will last 3 years. Lori is the former chairman of the U.S. Bishops Committee for Religious Liberty. He has served as the leader of the Baltimore Archdiocese since 2012. Joining us now is the incoming chair for the U.S. Bishops Committee on Pro-Life Activities, Archbishop William Lori. Welcome back to the show, Your Excellency. You are taking on this pro-life leadership role when the abortion debate is front and center in this nation. 2 weeks from now, the Supreme Court is taking up a major abortion case. I'm curious, as you take on this role this week, what do you see as your top pro-life priority right now?
First of all, I'd like to thank Archbishop Naumann for doing such a stellar job as my predecessor. I think our challenge is always the same. It's to proclaim the gospel of life. It is to evangelize about the gift of life and to move as many minds and hearts as possible to be open to this great gift of life and to be ready to cherish it and to defend it.
Absolutely. And your term will last 3 years, essentially the remainder of President Joe Biden's first term in the White House. Biden, as you know, is our nation's second Catholic president, but does have a pro-abortion administration. Your Excellency, how do you hope to engage with the Biden administration on the life issue, and what do you foresee as the greatest opportunities and challenges there?
First of all, I think that we have to take a look at our teaching. Our teaching is rooted in the universal moral law. It is not simply a teaching of the church. It is rooted in the universal moral law. Secondly, it is confirmed robustly by science. And finally, this teaching is brought together and highlighted in the most magnificent way in the teaching of the church. What we need to do constantly is to shine a very bright light on the truth of this teaching, to continually present it to those who are the leaders of our country, to urge them to open their minds and hearts to this teaching, which is part of the universal moral law, confirmed by science and therefore accessible to all, and to remind them that any just and peaceful society will protect its most vulnerable members. The reason why life is such a premier issue, the unborn life, is because they are the most defenseless.
That is such an important mission that you have. And you have previously served as the chair for the Committee for Religious Liberty. Can you speak to the importance of religious liberty when it comes to the pro-life cause?
The defense of life and religious liberty truly do walk together. In many circles, there is a move, a push to eliminate religious liberty altogether or to reduce it to merely the freedom of worship. But in fact, religious liberty means that we have the liberty, the freedom given to us by God, not only to worship, but also to act upon our faith and to bring our faith into the marketplace. Obviously, we do not want to be coerced to fund or support abortion or contraception or any of these other items that are contrary to the teaching of the church. And that's why, among the reasons why we must robustly defend religious liberty, and it's an ongoing challenge.
Absolutely. The two really go hand in hand. Your Excellency, you gave a homily this past January for the closing Mass of the National Prayer Vigil for Life at the Basilica, the National Shrine of the Immaculate Conception, and you spoke about the importance of anchoring our pro-life mission in the Eucharist. I thought that was so beautiful. Can you expand on that? How can our viewers anchor their pro-life beliefs to the Eucharist?
So today, just at our bishops' meeting today, we voted on a beautiful document on the Eucharist, and we gave enthusiastic support to a national Eucharistic revival. When you think about the Eucharist, you have to go back to the truth that Jesus became incarnate in the womb of the Blessed Virgin Mary and was born into this world. And he came among us. He began his entry into history as a helpless infant. When we reflect on that truth and mystery of the Incarnation, and then we receive our Lord in Holy Communion in the form of a host in a beautiful but a very small way, we recognize the link between life and the Eucharist. Also, the Eucharist is the source of our life. It's the source of our life in Christ. And as we open our hearts to the Eucharist, we have new eyes in which to see the dignity and the humanity of the unborn.
That's so beautifully said. And as you mentioned, the big news from the General Assembly this week is that the document on the Eucharistic coherence passed overwhelmingly. While I have you, can you just share your thoughts and clarify what this document on Eucharistic coherence truly is about?
This document is meant to highlight certain aspects of the Church's teaching on the Eucharist, which may have been forgotten or neglected or happens to be in need of emphasis in these days of ours. It also recognizes that post-COVID, we're not quite post-COVID, but there is a need to invite people back to church. And so the document speaks in a very beautiful way about, first of all, the Eucharist as a gift from God the Father. It's a gift of Christ who offered himself for us. It's the gift of his true presence. It is the gift of the Lord's desire to be one with us. And then it asks us what our response ought to be. And it certainly, our response ought to be one of praise and worship and thanksgiving and adoration. Our response ought to be works of justice and charity, including the defense of vulnerable human life at all ends of the spectrum. And also, before so great a mystery, all of us have to ask ourselves about our worthiness to receive so great a gift. We all ought to examine our minds and hearts and souls before we approach this great mystery. And as shepherds, we have the obligation to protect the integrity of the sacrament and to make sure that that it is being reverenced. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's a beautifully balanced document, and I am delighted that there was near unanimity in accepting it.
Yes, well, that's a great reminder for us all, and I want to assure you of our prayers for you as you take on this top pro-life leadership role. Know of our prayers. Archbishop William Lori of Baltimore, the incoming U.S. Bishop's pro-life chair. God bless you.
Thank you.
That does it for this edition of EWTN Pro-Life Weekly. Until next time, remember, life is a gift. Your life is a gift. God bless.